we're gonna roll into the conversion show today. And if you're listening just audibly, enjoy. If you are in front of a computer, you can pull up on YouTube for any extra visuals of the website. But to kick it off, I'm going to welcome Allen Burt from Blue Stout, who's been a long time supporter, partner of Just Uno, and is a conversion design agency specializing in Shopify, which Allen can give us a better breakdown than me probably. But what I do recommend, pull up on your phone, pull up on your computer, bluestout.com, and to really dig in, there's under, results, go to CRO winners.
Yeah,
there's
CRO winners.
Gems in there that I was studying. So, and Allen Burt, LinkedIn, pull them up. It's worth kind of getting some background. But with that, I'm going to welcome Allen to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is gonna be a ton of fun. It's been a while since we chatted. We've been working with Just Uno for years. What I'd say too, just from the CRO winners piece, if you are interested, that's the best place to go. Also, just go to bluestout.com/newsletter. And every Wednesday, we send out one of the brand new CRO winners every Wednesday in the newsletter. So we've got a database of them on site, and then we also send them out every single week.
So part of the show is all about what are the current trends in conversion, and what we're talking about with, customer acquisition costs going, increased over the years, where we're at today with the focus on retention, getting more out of your current owned customer base. With all those, there's 1,000 things you can do on site, but oftentimes the resources focus is not there with teams. The tools aren't there. The support from just actual theories of strategies, what to do. With this trove of strategies you have, if we were to step back, where are we today with conversion in your mind? We've been working on this for 10 plus years, both you and I in the space. We've seen the evolution. What's your take on what you see with clients and what you're working towards and conversion?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think we're at a really interesting crossroads right now because everybody, I think, is coming a little bit, I like to call it sort of we're in the hangover stage right now, where we've spent most brands have spent the last 5 years just pumping cash into ads, right? And it worked. It was profitable. You could scale quickly. There was really no reason not to. And the landscape has changed where you can't just scale through, social media ads like you used to anymore. It just doesn't make sense. And so you have to have a multi-touch point process for being profitable and continue to scale. And so I think this idea, everybody's always heard conversion rate optimization, but I think it's become much more important today in the minds of a lot of brands because it's now necessary, right? We see a lot of brands that'll hit a ceiling, and maybe it's a 10 million, maybe it's a 20 million, sometimes it's a 50 million. It kind of just depends on the space, where all of a sudden that next dollar in ad spend is unprofitable, or the margin on that next dollar in ad spend is just so small that it almost doesn't even make sense to continue to scale. And so they're now looking at alternatives. And what do we do to improve profitability? What do we do to continue to scale revenue? And they're realizing that there's multiple factors in this equation that goes beyond just traffic and audience, but includes, once that audience hits the site, how well do they convert? What rate do they convert at? Average order value? How often do they come back to buy again? Right. And so there's a lot of levers here that brands have to pull, conversion just being one of them. And I think a lot of brands are discovering this and realizing the power of it that 3 years ago they didn't have to worry about.
Well, it's been sexy and is sexy to spend money.
Yeah, right.
I love that. I love the hangover stage is kind of where we are. It's we were talking about conversion focused design earlier. There's so much you can do. You mentioned audiences, and that's what we were, when I think conversion, I really think customer experience. And there's kind of the foundational customer experience, but also consumer psychology.
Absolutely.
Are we satisfying the basic needs of the consumers first, and then we can get into incremental improvements? And to understand, the consumer psychology and empathy towards them, you have to understand who they are, which you have to have audience. You have to know who your audience is.
Yep.
What strategies do you have, or when you have a client come on board, to look at their audiences? Where do you start?
Yeah, it's a great question. And some of it depends on the brand and how well they know their audience. Some brands have sort of taken the time to dig into the data, and they have a really good understanding of what drives purchase decisions. Other brands don't. And so it depends a little bit on where they start. But regardless, we always extract as much as we can from the team. And so at the end of the day, whether or not they know it or not, the brands, the brand owners, the folks running the day-to-day have a lot more information if you know what questions to ask. So what we're always trying to dig out the very beginning is understanding, what do you know about your buyers that drives a purchase decision at the end of the day, right? And we know that customers make purchase decisions in essentially two stages, whether they realize it or not. It's always an emotional decision first, and then there's always a logical justification of that emotional decision. And depending upon the product and depending upon the industry and the type of buyer you have, more emphasis is placed on the emotional versus the logical. So if you're buying like a food product, a health food product, that's a lot of that's gonna be a logical decision based upon things like, macros and protein levels and where it was produced and all natural ingredients, right? So they might be sold emotionally on the brand, but they're gonna be logically sold on the ingredients. If it's a product like handbags, luxury handbags, that's gonna be primarily an emotional buy with just a very small amount of a logical justification for the emotional part of the purchase. And so you have to first start and understand, when to incentivize the buyer, what type of product are you selling? And then from there, you can start to dig into the data and actually watch customers and see how they interact on site. You can actually start running some tests to see, hey, if we actually move some of these more emotional selling points higher up in the customer journey, does that influence things like conversion rate and revenue? If we move, for some maybe things like a food product, if we move things like ingredients higher up on a page, does that start to affect sort of the logical decision-making process? So you can start to learn about the buyer through things like testing. But the first place we always start is just digging into what the brand already knows about their buyer.
That's interesting, the emotional and logical. I think to Mad Men, like just how they would those writers of that show, how they were able to just key into the emotional story and selling.
Yep.
Don Draper would go in. So when we talk logical, we're thinking, you mentioned ingredients and stuff. Would that also be is it, the core elements of the shopping experience being
100%.
shipping,
Yep.
returns, price, customer service? That would fall under the logical,
So logical, we have a framework we call the 3 Ps. And so you've got emotional selling, and then you've got logical selling. And on logical selling, we're always looking at the 3 Ps, and 3 Ps are questions about the product, right? So if it's a food product, as an example, people want to know what's in it. If it's a luxury handbag, right? They might be like, well, what is this going to look like on me? So like, is there a model that's showing what the bag and sizing is going to look like on you, right? So there's questions that customers have about the product, and that's going to vary depending upon what the product industry is. The second P is questions about process. And so this could be process with regard to how does the product work, right? If you're buying electronics, right, you might need to understand how easy this is to install. You go to Sonos, right, and you're looking into doing some, buy a product. And Sonos speakers, do I have to install this on my wall? Do I need a second product in order to make this work? Or is there just plug and play and it's ready to go? So there's questions about process as it relates to the product itself. And there's also questions about process as it relates to what happens after I buy this. When's it going to show up? Once I get it, if I try this on, it doesn't fit, can I return it, right? What's your return policy? So there's a whole slew of questions that kind of fall under this process P. And then the final is what we call perceived risk. And so at the end of the day, there's not risk associated with your product because it's a great product as the brand and the owner. But to the customer, there's a certain level of perceived risk if they've never purchased from you before. So you have to understand what that level of perceived risk is, and then how do you mitigate that perceived risk through the site experience. And so something like, for example, just at the most basic level, free shipping, free returns, or warranties, or look, you go to Patagonia, right? And Patagonia has a lifetime warranty on all their products. Tears for any reason, you send it back in, they send you a new one, or they fix it for you. And so that helps to reduce that level of perceived risk of the buyer. And that's, one of those logical decision-making points that every customer is going to have, is a certain percentage of perceived risk. And obviously, the higher the price point, the more important things like perceived risk become.
And that's where like trust comes in.
Yep, trust, big factor. Yep.
Solly from Bomb Tech Golf was just on last week. His 60-day money back guarantee to reduce the risk, it was a big winner for him, but it also saved him having to do road shows. Because he would go to do live demos, and
because he didn't have to do the live demos, right?
You have to do the live demos.
Essentially try them. Yeah.
It was a big win. A lot of what you're talking about on the emotional aspect with the product, process, perceived risk, I'm sensing we're talking about the product page here.
Product page is definitely the main sales page for that. But it happens throughout the entire buyer journey, right? And so, yes, product page is the main sales page, but like, as an example, you add a product to cart right before somebody goes to checkout, right? Anything that's going to explain to them a 100% money back guarantee. I mean, like, take Bomb Tech as a great example. Like, I don't know if Silly did this, but what we'd be looking at least testing, would be, okay, you've got a 60-day money back guarantee. Maybe somebody didn't see that on the product page. So when they go to cart and they go to checkout, we need to be reiterating those perceived risk reduction points throughout the entire stage of the customer journey. And also things like, logical selling can begin as early as the homepage. We run tests all the time on the homepage that will take customer testimonials or press mentions that speak very specifically to a pain point that a customer has that they need to make sure is solved as part of a product. And we'll start to introduce that story very, very early in the customer journey, so that they can see it multiple times before they even get to a product page to make a decision. So the entire journey has to be taken into account. It's not just one page, but the product page is definitely the primary sales page.
You mentioned the reviews and testimonials. One big trend I'm noticing right now that we're working towards is taking that About Us page and getting that more to the forefront. And really, most, pop-ups themselves, we're 13 years into building pop-ups, and they're still, in most cases, dumb. They treat every visitor the same, and messaging of save 10% off. It's like, no, there's more that can be done. And as we talk about, price is important, but it's not, when someone lands on the homepage, for example, it's not what people care about today. They care about the other key factor, trust. How do you build that trust to get them to the product page, or to get them to not bounce right away? Yep.
And it's typically kind of a balance, right? Where you need to make the claim or the hook, right? That's the reason they're there, right? So take food as an example, right? I'm just making something up, and say it's like a protein powder, right? And if somebody's there because they want a low calorie, high protein shake to have in the morning, you have to state the value proposition. And where, things like social proof come into play there is that it validates the claim. And so if I land on a page, I see, number one best-selling protein powder for, triathletes, right? Like, speaks directly to the ICP. And then below that, a quote from Outside Magazine that validates that initial claim, right? You're using the trust basically to your buyers come to the page, you've hooked them with what they care about, and then you've used social proof to validate the claim you just made that hooked them. And that's what then gets them to move on to something like a product page. And there's lots of ways to do that. But that's how we see things like trust early in the customer journey being the most effective.
That's a great example. I imagine you have some CRO winners with those.
I know we do. Yeah. I don't know, maybe not that exact example, but we definitely have examples of using social proof. So for example, I know we have a CRO winner that's very specifically where we removed an entire logo section on the homepage. So it was a product, I think it was actually an outerwear product. And I think we had logos from 5 different publications, very well-known publications, and removed all the logos and kept one single logo, but with a quote. And that quote very specifically addressed the primary selling benefit of that product. And that way outperformed, showing, 6 other, well-established press logos. So that single quote was sort of the game changer there for that test.
So I'm sure, like many retailers themselves, it's all about resources. And you just meant, like what you just mentioned is one strategy that can be tested and implemented. Where do you begin? Like,
yeah. It's a good question. I get that question all the time. It's the worst answer ever, because it just depends. But it does depend on the brand, and it depends upon where they are in their journey, right? And so, if a brand comes to us that's, sub $1 million in revenue, they're probably not a great fit for us, but it's, and they're saying, hey, we got to increase conversions. Typically their best game plan is not going to be, systematic A/B testing every single week, right? There's just not enough to move the needle there. If they're having trouble scaling profitably sub $1 million, there's a fundamental issue in alignment with their offer and their customer and their traffic, right? That's testing a few things on the homepage and product page is not going to change your ability to scale at that level if you don't have very true alignment with your product, your offer, and your audience. The brands that are 8-figure brands, which is the mainly all of our brands are above 10 million. They're in the sort of the 10 to 100 million range. Those brands at that point have found that alignment, right? They've scaled profitably, most of them, into the 8-figure range. And at this point, they're typically hitting the ceiling where, because right now, this is the main pain point, hitting a ceiling where ads are just not profitable, and they're having to find other ways to scale. And this is where, look, their offer and their audience made sense. They were able to scale to a certain point. Now it's time for us to go in and tweak and refine, right? And so the example, the analogy I always like to give, I think it's a good analogy. I'll let you tell me if you think it is. But it's, Formula One's, getting popular now. So I like to think of sites as like an F1 car, right? So there's a time for when you get in and you tweak aerodynamics and you fine tune the engine, and there's alignments, right? And that's what makes the difference between first and second place. But you don't even get on the grid unless your car's got 2 back tires, right? And so there's stages to this, and brands that are typically below that $10 million range, they're typically missing a back tire, right? There's something big that's a fundamental problem with their alignment between product, offer, audience. Once they get above that $10 million range, that's when we can start to really fine tune the elements. They're already going fast. They get a lot of traffic come through the site. 10 small changes made over the course of a few months can be the difference between an extra $1 million in profit or not. And so first off, we have to assess the stage of the business. And then once we assess that, and let's kind of take an 8-figure brand as an example, then we can dig into the weeds, look in the data, understand their top traffic channels, how are customers moving their way through the site, which of those channels are performing really well, which ones aren't, and then find the pain points where we see customers dropping off. And then we can assess why they're dropping off, and kind of using the frameworks, things like I talked about, emotional selling and the 3 Ps. We can use frameworks like that to then assess and say, okay, you're seeing a huge drop off of customers on your product pages. You guys sell a food product as an example. We don't see any easy access to ingredients, or you guys have buried the ingredients information deep in an expandable box at the bottom of the page. So we can then start to assess what may be the challenges and issues at those particular pain points, and then start to run tests to improve them.
Well, I have a theory that 99.9% of websites can be optimized further.
Yeah.
And you could probably say 100%. I'm going to go with 100%.
Yes, I would, I'll say 99.9 just to be conservative.
Yeah, just cover that. Just to cover, of course, our own 2 websites.
Yeah, right.
We're not the cobbler's shoe situation here.
Right.
Shoes, right. My experience with being a retailer myself in a hyper growth mode and working with other retailers is this. When we were growing at 300% a year, we were focused on operations. We had the traffic. 1% here didn't make a difference when I'm growing 300% because we have so much traffic coming in, etc. Once you get to that 8-figure mark, that 1%, you can report back to the CFO of how much money investing X dollars into an agency or
Yep.
software makes. And that's the other, element of getting back to the ROI.
Yeah.
There's no, like, the ROI on focusing on conversion it's immediate.
Yeah. It couldn't be more clear in the data.
Yeah. But that's when you have to be able to present that as, and right now everyone is claiming attribution. Where if we go down that fork in terms of testing, how do you present that back to your clients?
Yeah, great question. And it requires education. And I think there's two main challenges right now. And this is, especially, we see this a lot for very mature brands that we work with that have been around for a long time. Like we have a couple of brands that are, over 100 years old, which is wild. You talk to these brands that have been, in business for a long time, they understand it better. Brands that are fast growing that, 2 years ago, they were doing 5 million. Now they're doing, 25 million. They haven't been in the game long enough to kind of really understand the nuances of some of these optimization practices. And so they still look at things like full store conversion rate. And so I think this is one of the big sort of missions I'm on when we talk to brands, is understanding that looking at your full store conversion rate, like log into Shopify, look at your analytics and look at your full store conversion rate, is an absolutely terrible metric for making any sort of decision. There's too many variables that come into play, seasonality effects, traffic, products out of stock, right? There's just, maybe you made some bad merchandising decisions. And so there's so many factors that compound into that number and it's going to fluctuate wildly depending upon sales and all types of different types of data points. And so we have lots of brands that are like, look, we need to grow full store conversion rates, 25%, but we're also planning on doubling traffic over the next 12 months. It's like, I can tell you right now, that's probably impossible to do. You can 100% optimize your site and drive more revenue. But if you're talking about introducing your brand to 2x your audience, so now half of this audience is going to be cold, they've never heard of you before, and expect your conversion rate to increase at the same time is illogical, right? It's like everybody knows it scales traffic, that next outer loop, right? That next outer circle of audience is always going to perform worse. They're colder, they're less niche, they're also more expensive. And so part of this is training brands, understanding that you have to dig deeper and you have to isolate those numbers. And so you need to look very specifically and say, okay, look, we're going to look very specifically at your Facebook traffic that lands on your collections page and goes to your product page and goes to cart, goes to checkout. Because for you right now, as an example, that is your top revenue pathway, right? And so we're going to focus on this because we know that traffic source, right? We can monitor that, we can measure it, we can see how it changes. We're going to improve performance across that channel. And that doesn't necessarily mean conversion increases. It just is going to mean revenue increases. So if we keep conversion rate the same, but average revenue per user coming through that channel improves by 25%, that's a huge win. And that should be the win you care about. And so a lot of this comes back to, we talk about conversion rate optimization. We talk about conversions. Conversions are one lever. What everybody cares about is revenue and profit. And so we have to work with brands to help them understand that at that size, full store conversion rate is a terrible metric. Don't make decisions based upon it. A, B, we need to isolate, look at very specific channels. And then 2, what we really need to be tracking is revenue increases, and conversion just one of those levers that we can pull to improve it.
Okay,
I'm not sure if that answered your question or not, but
no, that is fantastic, because you mentioned full store conversion rate versus isolating channels and digging into that. And when you analyze a business, what I like to do is the same thing. It's like, let's look at the low hanging fruit. Let's take where, let's just say 80% of your revenue, where it's coming from. Would you rather increase that by 10%? Or would you like to focus on that other 20%, increase that by 10%? You're going to take that 80. So what is that 80, and whatever that breakdown is? And so if you look at those channels coming in, okay, let's figure out let's isolate your 5 channels. Mm-hmm. Let's look at what the conversion rate is for each of them. And you can even do sub channels of, because you have brand new unidentified visitors, you have repeat visitors who haven't purchased, and then you have customers coming back that have purchased. And then from those, you build out the profile of, let's talk about international, because your Australian customers, you need to speak to them differently than ones from other countries, there you got to talk about shipping, you got to talk about payment methods, and let them know, hey, we get you. You're in Australia, you want a product, we'll get it to you. So now you get those, and that is where we are today. But providing a tool to track that and to manage it, that's what's exciting about what's being built, in our world.
And that is a major gap. And I think, unfortunately, it's about to get even harder with the move to GA4, because for most brands, GA4 it's this black hole of data without very clear ways to segment. You can do it. It's just difficult, and it's new, and nobody knows how to use it. So what we do for our clients is, like, as an example, we pull in GA data, and we basically build out custom data studios for brands that show them these metrics, and we map them for them so they can see these channels. But you're absolutely right. From a tool perspective, there's been a lack of good quality tools that focus on the site experience, that track those analytics, track that traffic by channel, shows performance changes over time, et cetera.
The big conversation currently is zero and first party data.
Yeah.
And, I have this gut feeling that while a lot of people are talking about it, when it comes to resources to actually implement the on-site zero party first party capture, if we've had such struggles to this point to just focus on conversion, are people focusing on capturing that zero party data?
Yeah, I hear you. I think it's a challenge. I don't think many are.
What if someone's listening, they're like, they've heard about zero party, their boss maybe asked them what's going on. What recommendations do you have? Any strategies in your CRO winner, or what are you seeing?
That's a tough one. I don't think we have anything in sort of like the CRO winner side to really focus on that. I think the piece we always recommend for brands is when it comes to, it really is, first off, you just have to understand the channels. You have to understand where your customers are coming from, and then be able to map them through the site. And that's actually not that hard to do with the existing data. You just need to know how to do it. And I think that's, for most brands, that's really right now the best first step, because you'd be shocked by how many brands we talk to that are, over 20 million in revenue. And, you show them something in analytics, and it's like you've shown them the light. Like, they're like, how did you find this? And it's like, and actually made a post on LinkedIn about this the other day. It's like, I truly believe, because I've now seen this across, a dozen brands over the last 6 months, where, especially, and I think there's a sweet spot here where it's probably somewhere between like 10 million and 30 million in revenue, where, they're scaled, they've grown, but the team is still super, super bootstrapped, very tight, right? Like, everybody's wearing a dozen hats a piece to get work done. Nobody has time or the inclination, or maybe the inclination, but frankly, just don't have the skill set to go in and spend the time slicing the data in a way that's going to provide meaningful, actionable metrics. And so because we see it, there's lots of $20 million brands sitting out there right now that are literally just sitting on millions of dollars in profit of optimization opportunities, and they don't even know
it. The marketing teams, that's been the phrase this year. They're asking to do more with less, while also having to cut their MarTech stack down.
Yeah.
So, hey, we got to cut budget. What can we cut?
Yep.
and maybe they have less resources on their own team.
Yep.
It
That's
goes
100% the case.
The building a sustainable business is what it gets in. Comes from. It comes from leadership in companies recognizing where they should focus their time and resources for the company. And you look at customer-centric brands; those are the ones that are able to retain their customers right now and have an owned customer base they can market to bring them back. We've talked a lot about the 10-figure brands, the 6-7 figure brands. The main message for that segment is that it's all about starting today.
Start collecting the data
capturing whether it's an email address, whatever
Yep.
you can capture so that you build up your own channels.
Yep. 100%.
And so that when
Yeah.
they do come back.
Yep. I mean,
I,
it's what old is new, right? It's emails not going away, right? And the better you can own that channel, own the data, the better.
I often have referenced Amazon, and Amazon gets referenced in positive and negative ways. There's so many incredible positives, given Jeff Bezos has been customer centric from day one, just as Tony Hsieh at Zappos. You're focusing on that customer experience. Just this last week, I bought some shoes online, speaking of Zappos, and I had I got a pair of New Balances, and then some Saucony's. Saucony, is that the name of it?
Yeah.
And my wife's like, I showed her the shoes. She's like, don't get those. Look at Saucony's, because those too old, man. So I looked at Saucony's, and I was like, I'm gonna test out shopping on. Can I say their brand? And I was on Sauconys.com shopping. I had a pair of shoes in the cart, and they absolutely failed on me. They offered me a 20% off code, and it when it went to checkout, only gave me 10% off. Couldn't find out.
They just bombed. Oh.
And then there was other things that happened. I forget. So in the end, I went to Zappos and found another brand, Goya or something. It's an awesome brand. Bought from them.
Easy. Yeah.
Easy.
It's friction. Customer friction's a big deal. It's I think this goes to, I think, what things that Shopify has done incredibly well is focus on kind of front of the house or front end consumer and customer experience enhancements. And one of my favorite tests that we've seen perform incredibly well across brands is, like, we all know express payments. We all understand what Shop Pay is. If for merchants watching this, Shop Pay is an incredible tool. But what we've done in some instances with brands is we don't even offer the Shop Pay on like a product page or the cart page. All we just say is express payments available or Shop Pay available in text. And just mentioning that improves conversions across the board and almost every time we test it. And I think it speaks really, really highly to how much consumers value just ease. And they've made a decision, you've sold them emotionally. A lot of that emotional decision may have been made across social or the channels before they got to the site. Once they got to the site, it's really just about how fast can I find what I want and how easily can I buy it without having to think twice about it, pull out a credit card and put it in. And stores that offer Express and offer things like Shop Pay, they convert better. And so all the data that came out from Shopify earlier today talking about how they convert better than everybody else, I fully, I haven't seen any of the data to back it, but I fully believe it. Just based on
Harley will come to speak to your CEO or CFO, according to him.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great.
I think you just provided a fantastic tip for the audience, and maybe something we can kind of close down today with.
Sure.
Is payment is critical. And it's why Amazon has been so successful. You show up on Amazon, you're already logged in, and they have the one-click pay, buy button, everything. And Shopify has been working to figure out how can we replicate that experience, along with Bolt, Google Pay, Shopify, but how to do it across platform ecosystems where it makes sense for, like, when you're shopping 10 different websites for it to work, it makes sense. And customer friction, that is something I had written down actually yesterday, which was understanding what are the friction points, and let's start there and start just plugging away at reducing those for your customers. But the real tip that you had is having that, you don't have to say use Shop Pay. You just have to speak to the consumer, say, hey, we get it. You want easy payment or one-click easy payment. Doesn't matter which one you offer. You're speaking to their needs and understanding, showing empathy. So that right there, I think we can take away.
It's a great tip, especially on mobile, especially for very mobile-centric brands.
Yeah, mobile is God, I wish we had another 30 minutes because maybe that'll be the next one, because what's going on in mobile, it's a mobile first world for many
Yeah.
brands.
Yeah.
And talk about something that's often overlooked
Mm-hmm.
in every industry, be it SaaS. I just received a payment link from Proposify, and I couldn't pay because their cookie banner wouldn't close.
And you'd be shocked at how many brands have that type of stuff going on and they have no idea.
Yeah. I think the best thing for brands to do, which I always love to do, was go and shop my website. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
do you ever ask your clients, like, hey, when was the last time you bought something from your website?
We actually don't ask that question enough. I think that's an amazing question to ask brands. We do it, right? And we take on brands, and that's one of the first things we do. Is where's the low-hanging friction points, just from, we can look at the data all day, and we're a data-driven firm, but it's amazing what you discover just by pulling up a site on mobile and trying to click around and seeing where you get frustrated.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do is I watch my wife shop on her phone, because she shops on her phone all the time. Yeah. And where does she get mad? Where does she get pissed off? And now she's just learned. She just tells me, she's like, I'm not buying this because they won't let me do this or this or this. I'm like, well, that's an amazing insight.
Understanding your customers.
Yep. And I think the last piece I'd mentioned too, and somebody want to close it down, is that in a world where profit margins matter, these friction points are a big deal, right? And I think this is the math that most brands don't do, is they don't realize that, okay, sure, we can grow revenue 10% by scaling up ads. The reality is that scaling up ads by 10% to drive 10% more revenue is not going to improve margins by 10%, because the cost of acquisition actually goes up the more you scale. The difference is, if you can improve revenue 10% with conversion, at the end of the day, that's 10% more revenue that you're getting on the same marketing spend. And so there is no incremental cost of acquisition to improve conversion rates by 10%. So a 10% improvement in revenue from CRO is closer to a 20 to 30, 40, 50% increase in profit margin, depending upon what your gross margins are, and how big you are. But I don't think many brands do the math that way, because I think brands have been less profit focused in recent years, the last kind of 5-10 years. But now they're becoming more profit focused, and it's literally the most profitable thing you can do, is just drive more revenue from your existing marketing spend.
Well, you look at sustainability, if we were to go down this gopher hole right now, it's like that visitor, if you don't convert them on that first visit or the second visit, you're having to retarget them to get them back by
100%.
As in, whether a new visitor or whatever. And, if you just capture that email address, you can at least do list suppression in your paid ads and start emailing them to get them back.
Yep.
That right there, your ROAS, you can solve a lot. And then, talk about time and resources. And then the whole other side is their customer experience. We haven't talked about post-purchase.
Right.
Once they purchase, are you getting that package out? Are you getting them the right item? Are they satisfied? Are they going to return it? Reduction of returns, a happy customer come back and buy. This retail world, there is a tremendous amount that goes on beyond just driving traffic.
Absolutely.
And we're still in the infancy of trying to understand what that is and what needs to happen. But like you said, there is so much money being left on the table right now. And thankfully, they have Blue Stout and Justuno to help them get that money.
That's exactly right.
Allen, well, thank you for the time today. Really appreciate it.
No, this is a ton of fun. I'm glad we did this.
Yeah. As we were partway through 2023, I think businesses are going to be in a healthier place come 2024 as we create more sustainable business models here. I think,
I think almost every brand I talk to there's a similar discussion being had, where it's this year it's a bit of a rebuilding year for everybody. It doesn't mean you're not still continue to scale, but it means that there's pieces of the model that are no longer working and they need to be rebuilt. It's like everybody won the Super Bowl the last 3 years, and now they're at the bottom of the league, and everybody's got to have to kind of rebuild the team a little bit. And so I think there's a massive opportunity for brands to come out of this wildly more profitable, wildly more sustainable, and just a much better position to scale, because there's always opportunity around the turn, right? There's going to be new traffic channels. There's going to be new opportunities to introduce your product to your audience. And so you might as well be fully optimized and ready to take advantage of it when it comes.
All right, great. Well, here's to 2024.
Exactly.
Awesome, Allen. Well, thank you so much. Bluestout.com. And how else can anyone listening? I know I think you have an pre-audit. How else can people check in with Blue Stout?
Yeah, so the best ways, so bluestout.com is the main site. If you're interested in getting and seeing, we have a massive database of CRO recommendations that are based upon actual A/B test results that have been run on 8, 9-figure brands. And we email those winners out every single Wednesday. So you can go to bluestout.com/newsletter. And that's the best place to sign up for those. And that'll also give you access to our entire database of winners. And then I'm on the socials, Twitter, LinkedIn at just Allen Burt. And I post daily CRO wins across both those every day.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thank you again. And we've got some more exciting guests coming down the pipe. So be sure to subscribe, get alerts when we launch these. And with that, happy converting.